And here we go. Divorce sucks. Welcome to Divorce with Integrity. This is the most important and open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of moving from matrimony to acrimony to harmony. Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people around the world. Now, how can I make the categorical statement that all the tens of thousands of people that tune in and listen to our podcast, Divorce with Integrity, are always good-looking? Because it means that you're always looking for and finding the good. That's actually the premise of this entire podcast, looking for and finding the good in life. And if it actually means having to recognize that the marriage situation that you're in now does not benefit both parties, and therefore parting is a better route to becoming and be living with integrity in your own life, and that's what we're talking about. And I must say that to our wonderful panel, Esty Starr, Lori McDermott, Jeff Goldberg, and sometimes Joe Applebaum, and myself, your humble host, Barry Shore, I receive hundreds and hundreds of emails and direct messages and such from people who say, first of all, thank you for doing this, because nobody's talking about divorce per se. They're talking about divorce in the sense of how you do it and legal things like that. But the idea of divorce with integrity is really what captures people's imagination, because it's really about living authentically in your life, not just for yourself, meaning self-centered, but recognizing that it's that it is the best solution in a particular situation after you've gone through looking for other solutions. And the fact that we're discussing this openly, directly, and fully really animates people. So today we're going to discuss an interesting situation. And I probably had 87, maybe even 88 different letters, comments, emails regarding the same idea. So I'm trying to formulate it into one big question, and I'm going to do as the following. And the question really comes about as this. When did you, again, the people who are divorced, and Lori, who's the wife expert who deals with people who either going through wanting to or in process of getting divorced, when did you recognize in your marriage that divorce was the best route, not to flee, but the best route of you moving forward in your life? That's the question that came in very many forms. When did you know? Was it 6 months, 6 years, 30 years? So we'll talk about that, because I'm going to give one little anecdote, if I may. Most people, at least the ones I receive information from and worked with in life, most people that get divorced have been married more than 5 years. Sometimes 6 and 7, 8, 9, 10, when a divorce begins to happen. But there's an interesting phenomenon that I've experienced through friends of mine with their children, that people are getting married and within 6 months getting divorced. And interestingly enough, the parents of they're really kids, because they're somewhere between 21 and 25, getting divorced after 6 months, actually applaud what happened, because they recognize, if you can recognize in 6 months that union is not the best for both parties, then the ability to recognize that and act with integrity to separate is great for everybody. But we're talking, that's an interesting phenomenon that's happening now, but we're talking more about people who've been married 5+ years. When did you, we'll start with Esty, because she's our leadoff batter. She oftentimes gets a hit and get on base and such. When did you, wonderful Esty, who I think you were married for 12 years total, is that correct?
15.
15 years. Hello, that's a long time. I mean,
Yeah.
that means she got married when she was 12. She just
Yeah, that's what people kind of say when they look at me. They're like, wait, so we're 13?
Yes, she was a child bride. But 15, so when did you fully recognize that parting was the best solution for not just you, but your spouse and your children?
About 2 hours after I was handed divorce papers.
Wow. So it wasn't until the end of the 15 years that it
And you
really,
want to know when I fully recognized,
yes.
that there was no other way, it was a few hours after I was served divorce papers. Until
But
then, I still held out like a maybe. There was always that little maybe, like it could turn around, it could be okay. Right? For anyone who's been hearing me before, like this is just who I always was. One partner for life, right? We don't get divorced. I never said the word divorce, and I refused to believe it. Even when I had papers in my hand, I called them dissolution of marriage papers. I couldn't even say the word for like another week or two. I was so conditioned from myself. Yeah, it was only after I calmed down, after being served, where I was like, we're done. Oh my God. And then, it took another year or two for my internal system for me to stop dreaming that I was still married. I think it was more than a year. It might have been close to 2 years, year and a half, I think, before I ever had a dream that I was divorced. I was divorced for more than a year and a half, and I was still dreaming I was married. I was that attached. I was a little nuts. But yeah, it took until that moment for me to truly and fully believe that there was no other way.
And I'm going to make a leap of faith here. And the reason that this entire podcast exists, and again, we're touching people all over the world. The reason this podcast exists is because of wonderful Esty. She and I had a discussion, and the emotional roller coaster that she went through after being handed the divorce papers, and of course, every emotion that would be termed, for want of a better term, negative, such as anger and frustration and lashing out, et cetera, she had to go through all that to get to the place where she could live for herself and with herself in integrity and recognize that this was something actually beneficial. But that year and a half of turmoil was terrible in every aspect. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it wasn't a year and a half. It was 3 years.
3 years.
It was a year and a half before I started dreaming I was divorced. Sometimes it
Okay.
was a solid 2.5, almost 3 years to like move through all of it. And I can say I still don't have moments, right? There's still little residual bits sometimes that hit me, moments. I had a moment just a few weeks ago, right? About a month ago. I found the really, really, really ridiculously cool thing where I can make my own planner, right? I teach different kinds of work-life balance for over a decade. And I have my own plannering system that I've used for myself. And I found something online where I could build my own planner. I was like, this is amazing. And so in one of the sections in the weekly planning pages that I made myself, I'm like, I'm going to plan my weekly dinners. And so I put Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I was like, and then I burst out crying for the next like 10 minutes because I was like, I don't need to plan dinner because I only plan dinners when my kids are with me. They're with me weekdays. They're with their dad on weekends. So yeah, once every month or two, I plan weekend dinners. But it was just like my whole life. Do you understand? Because I'm insane organized to run 2 companies and family and all the things, I would have monthly calendaring menu systems that I built. And then to put in my planner that I only had to plan dinner Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I just broke down. I completely, and this is a month ago. So there's always these moments that I never expect. And I just kind of like, how do I all through the week? Yeah, that was fun times. So there's still pieces.
How long have you been divorced?
Separated now 3 years. When our papers were stamped, it's still less than a year, like from when it was like stamped. But that's because it took us 2.5 years from when we separated until we got it all the way through agreement, settlement, court system, etc. But
By the way, that's a very great segue, if I may, Jeff, and ask you the similar question. First of all, you can mention how long you were married, and when did you recognize that divorce was of benefit, not just to you, because you weren't so much fleeing, but that it was going to be a springboard for growth, both for you and your wife?
Yeah. So first, let me say this. I believe that getting married at 21 to 25 is a mistake. You're too young. You don't know your rear end from a hole in the ground, and you need to experience some life before you make a life commitment. Which, because I'm like Esty, when I got married, it was like, we're not getting divorced. There's no such thing. The only thing that would ever get me to leave you is if you cheat on me. Anything else, we'll work it out. So I'm with you, Esty.
By the way, that's a very good point. How old were you when you got married?
45. I'm sorry, 41. Had my first child at 45. Yeah.
Oh, so you got married at 25?
No, 41.
You were 41 when you got married?
Yes. All my life, I said, I'm never, ever getting married. And if I'm ever stupid enough to get married, I'm never having children.
Wait a minute.
I've got 3 kids.
Okay, so we love this. So he was 41, fully mature, successful businessman, thinking that he knows something about life, gets married, thinking he's never going to have children, has children. I think you have 2 or 3, right?
3.
3, right? Up yours, 3.
No, I adore them. I adore my kids and I adore their mother. She's a great mom. We just don't want to live together.
And your wife obviously was younger enough to be able to bear 3 children. In other words, she wasn't 39 at the time. And
she was 37.
And you had 3 children. Okay, so we got a lot to unpack.
All my kids are in vitro. They're all test tube babies.
Okay, so this is even more interesting. Then we'll do it.
You didn't just have kids. You had kids. Yeah, you had kids.
Just wait a minute. So Jeff nailed it. I mean, he's mature. His wife is mature. They know what they want to do. They plan. And yet, what happened, Jeff? How long were you married before you began to understand that this is not where you're going to be?
Yeah, so I'm going to differentiate between when should I have known and when did I actually know. And when
Let's differentiate. Yes.
Okay, so when should I have known? 2 weeks before my wedding, when my best man called me and said, "You can't marry this woman. You're going to be my client." He's a divorce attorney. He said, "She's the toughest woman I ever met. She's going to eat you alive. You will one day be my client." And
okay, by the way, I want to interrupt for a moment. The genius and why I love having Jeff on the panel, because he's mentioned this previously, and it's such a great story because it shows you the difference between intellect and the heart. It just is as smart as one can be. It just doesn't matter because when that love bubble exists, it's going to work. Okay, so 2 weeks before you should have, but now let's put that aside. Yeah. Now you're in the marriage. Now when?
So you're absolutely right, by the way, Barry. It's the heart. In my head, I knew he was absolutely right, and I should have called the wedding off, but my heart would not let me do it. It just wouldn't. So we were married for 10 years. The last year of our marriage, I lived in my own basement by my choice, not her. She didn't say get out of the bed, but I could feel the waves of hatred coming over every evening. And I moved down to the basement where my office was. I had a mattress on the floor, and for a year, I lived down there. And after a year, I was up going to the bathroom in the morning while she was getting ready to leave for work. And I said, I'm not going to mention any, Dolores, let's work this out. This isn't good for me. It's not good for you. It's certainly not good for our children. Let's find a way to work this out. And she said, I'm thinking in the other direction. And I said, well, there's only 2 directions. And if that's what you're thinking, you know who my lawyer is, go get one. And that's what she did. And in that conversation, I knew that my marriage was over. I still, like Esty, I still held out hope. We can fix this. We can make this work if we're both committed and reasonable adults, but we weren't.
So this is fascinating because you're mirror imaging in some way what Esty said. There are 2 parts. One is hope. Hope springs eternal. And the other part is that you said that you were actually separated for a year before you divorced.
Pretty much.
In essence, there was a physical separation. There was certainly a mental separation. And I hope that she cried as well as you cried sometimes at night on an emotional separation. But the reality was that you were separated and you wanted to work things out. Like Esty upset. She wanted to, until those divorce papers came. And even after that, the reality of saying, no, that's it. It's over. Tell me that doesn't rip your heart out.
It did. It did absolutely. And to this day, I still believe it could have been worked out if we both wanted to badly enough and were being reasonable, but we weren't. But yes, it was heartbreaking. My father was divorced, married 6 times, divorced 5. My mother 3. So I came into divorce is the way you go, but that wasn't my feeling. My feeling now is that we're not really meant as human beings to live together forever. I can tell you I love you today and I'll love you tomorrow, but 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, that's a long, long time, and a lot happens and people change. Now, I don't know how much the 2 of us changed, my ex-wife or I, but we just got to the point where we couldn't be together anymore, at least in her mind. And I certainly wasn't going to fight with her.
So I'm not going to disagree with you about people who are not meant to be together for eternity, both on the physical level and the spiritual level. By the same token, you just gave us an interesting background for you, which somewhat presaged the potential difficulty that you could have in marriage, i.e., watching your father, your mother, and then having input from your best friend, marriage counselor, divorce lawyer, recognizing that the woman that you were marrying was at best a difficult situation. And
Right.
you went into it with the strategy that no business person would ever use in business, which is hope. Because hope is not a great strategy. it's for losers, no offense. But as we said, the heart ruled the mind. And I'm going to ask you a deep question here. And if you can answer it, great. Were there times in the 9 years before you separated that there was, in your experience, deep emotional love and bonding that really made your life better?
Absolutely, positively.
Okay,
From the time
very
we
nice.
first started dating through most of our marriage, it was, I'm not calling her bipolar, but it was almost a bipolar marriage. Sometimes we were just loving and adoring each other, and other times we just couldn't stand the sight of each other.
Fascinating. Thank you for that. Lori, that's a great segue, because you experienced divorce not on a personal level, even though you were very close to it, but you do work with numbers of people, mostly women, who are either in the process of or certainly considering getting divorced. Am I correct?
Yeah.
And tell me, if you could just, obviously you can't do a broad brush, but think of one particular person, and in that particular person's case, how long was she or he married before there was a divorce? Can you think of one
So,
particular case?
yeah, a woman I was chatting with this morning who has been dating someone new and is really, really happy. So she was married to someone for 14 years, and his father died, and he got a girlfriend and decided he didn't want to be married anymore. And she thought he was crazy, and she would constantly yell at him. She was an Italian girl in New Jersey, and she threw things at him, and she was just a raging nightmare. So he mirrored that, and the 2 of them did this dance until she met me, and I'm like, calm down, let's figure this out. And because she wanted to be married, but she was being mean to him. So it's our ego. I always say egos get divorced, not humans. So her ego was
That's a
in
women.
full.
Yeah, I also want to pause on that. That was
We'll come back to that. We will unpack that. It's a
You
great
can unpack
line.
that. So some people do. Some people, like if I had married my high school, college boyfriend, I would definitely have sat down with him and said, I don't want to be married to you anymore. If I had stayed with him, I would have gotten divorced. I know that for sure. He's not anyone I could be matched with. But that would have been a logical, ethical conversation that we would have with integrity, right? So this situation with this lady was just out of control. Anyway, she did meet someone else, and her husband stopped dating the crazy lady he was dating, and he's moving on this way and she's moving on this way, and they're forming a friendship. And that is when you get rid of the baggage, you get rid of the suitcases, you get rid of the rocks that you want to throw at each other, and you find peace to just get along. Are you going to love every part of them? No. Are you going to like every part of them? No. But do you accept this is what they are? Yeah. No one's perfect. It's like my own brother drives me freaking nuts. I've got to be with him. And sometimes I have to share a space with him. He drives me crazy, but I'm kind to him and I'm nice to him, because if I'm mean to him, I know what I'm going to get back. And I don't want that. So I'm going to be kind. So.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here, and people are loving it. First of all, I have to say thank you to our wonderful panel for making the time to do this. I mean, you're doing a very big favor for many tens of thousands of people around the world. And you should know that. This is not just unpacking your personal story. This is really helping a lot of people. I want to go to some of the things that you said, wonderful, Lori, because again, you're dealing with multiple people and multiple personalities. And I like the idea of egos get divorced, not necessarily people. I mean, it's obviously people, but it's the ego that seems to be a driver. And I love the image of the woman throwing things at her husband because he was doing something. So it's the exact opposite. Again, it's the heart over the head, right? Well, throwing things at somebody doesn't create an opportunity for love and peace and harmony, right? I'm going to throw things at you, expect that you're going to respond in a different way.
And love me and stay married to me as I whip things at you.
Yeah. I want you to remember when this shoe hits you in the head that you really love me. Okay, so it's funny to think about, and yet now both of them understand that they can part. And here again is the whole purpose of our podcast. Divorce with integrity is not just, okay, we got divorced legally, physically, etc., but to continue to badmouth or in any way create dissension for the person that you had a relationship with for X number of years, doesn't do any harm to the other person. It only harms oneself. And the genius of divorce with integrity potentially is that you now can live with integrity and live in a place of kindness, of growth, of love, of peace, and pursue those with vigor. Or as I was raised in Boston, we call it with vigor, V-I-G-A-H. And you told us now that both of these adult beings are now more happy in their new situations, and they're creating a friendship that could not or did not exist prior. Oftentimes when people are married, I'll go to Jeff's comment about not being married for one person forever. Oftentimes at least in my experience, I did not grow up in a household where the parents divorced. Did they ever yell at each other? Hello? Human beings. They actually yelled at each other. But we never saw I'm talking about we, meaning my sisters and I, we never saw our parents hate each other. In other words, the yelling sometimes was out of frustration. We understood that. But it wasn't hate against each other. And they became very good friends. They liked each other. And they had a group that they were with. And the reason I mention this is because I don't think it happens as much these days. They used to play cards together, gin rummy. I don't know if anybody knows what gin rummy is anyway. But they had a group of, 4 couples, and they played together. In those card games, because we were just a house and kids can hear everything, sometimes people would start yelling at each other. We understood as kids that the adults were not like kids yelling at each other, and yet they were. No, they would yell at each other, and then by the end of the evening, it's still huggy-buggy. It's love. It's life. And part of what happens, I think, in marriage is that oftentimes the friendship aspect does not rise to the top. People continue to think that it's deep love that is necessary to maintain things. And yet, and I go again to what you said, Jeff, I think it's very important. If you are going to stay married for a long time, in our case, 45 years, have my wife and I gone through stuff? Hello? Would she have loved to throw shoes at me? Yes, but she recognized, like you said, Lori, that doing that is not going to be of benefit. So she does the opposite. She becomes so kind to me that if I ever thought of being mean to her, I'd have to be more dumb than a 2x4. The result of recognizing each other and living in a friendship community, as opposed to what happens in the first years of marriage, which are mostly, in quotation marks, love, lust, whatever you want to call it. It needs to evolve. I think you said so nicely, Jeff, evolve into another aspect. So I'm going to go to you, wonderful Esty, and discuss this, because your situation is not unique. In other words, you didn't know you were divorced until you were divorced with papers. And even that didn't mean you were divorced. Was there a friendship aspect? Because I get dozens and dozens of questions. Was there a friendship aspect of your marriage that was happening during those years? Or was it mostly married? We love each other. Hello, without having to say it. We have relationship, physical, sexual. We have kids. Our calendar is so full, like you said. My calendar is so full, planning out meals and taking people, doing that we have no time to actually look at, am I a human being? What am I doing? Am I growing? You hear the question? Is there
we were friends, and we're friends again now. And that was actually one of the hardest parts, because he was kind of like my main friend, because I didn't really have time for other ones. So when we separated, I didn't really have a lot of other friends. He had been my main friend. No, we definitely were friends. And even now, like, we'll get on a call to discuss the kids and we'll end up chatting about stuff. My kids know, like, that we're friends. They do. They say, like, you like each other, you just don't like each other enough to be married anymore. Or like, they're like, the little ones are still piecing it together.
By the way, that's a very important point you made. I just want to unpack something.
Yeah.
Let's be blunt. For kids especially, it's difficult. I think it's even difficult for adults. You like each other enough, but when you're married, but what does that mean? But from the kids' point of view, it's at best confusing. However, there may be an element of benefit in it.
Of course there is. It's much better than imagining that your parents hate each other. One of the most important things that someone told me right after my divorce, right? Everyone says, like, don't badmouth your spouse in front of your kids. And duh, yeah, I knew that. But one of the reasons that someone gave me was so brilliant. She had been a child of divorce. And she said, your children are half you and half your spouse. So when you badmouth, if you were to badmouth your spouse in front of your kids, you are insulting parts of them. You're creating an inner conflict of self-hatred for them. That blew my mind. So she said, not only, and this is part of how I became me over the last few years. She said, not only do you not ever criticize or insult your spouse in front of your kids, as angry as you are, as ridiculous as they're being, every opportunity you have, look for a reason to compliment the aspect of your spouse in your kids. And I did. My ex has gorgeous eyes, really beautiful. Like, I have these like deep chocolate eyes. He has these like multicolored green, like, very cool. And a few of my kids got them. So that was one of the things I could easily compliment. You know, I was like, oh, you have dad's eyes. They're beautiful. Like, your beautiful eyes you got from your dad. You know, I would look for whatever I could, even as he's like dragging me through the court system and I want to strangle him. Like, trying to like not wish that he's dead, because that would be worse for the kid. You know, but like, I'm like, you have the most beautiful eyes from your dad, because they are half of each of you. And so when you're friends, to me, because I study a lot of psychology also, you're showing them that the internal parts of them can also be friends, right? They are half of each of you. And my kids know, I got this from you and I got this from dad. And I like to say, you got the best of both of us.
I want to just unpack one thing you said, because it resonates with me deeply. I'm making a public announcement here. So I have one son, married to a wonderful woman, and they are in the process of finalizing their divorce after 6 years. And so we have, actually 7 years. So they have a 6-year-old son and a 3-year-old son, my grandsons. And you're right, I've pleaded with my son, Ezra, to make sure that anything and everything he says about Shoshi is only good. Because first of all, I told him in a self-centered way. It's good for you, Ezra, to learn how to speak well of other people. Always speak well. Divorce is so painful that it sometimes can bring out those negative things. So I love what you said. Your friend said, no matter how angry you are, find something beneficial to say.
Find something
to
you
the
can
kids.
compliment.
Compliment,
Find something
right.
you can compliment in your child that comes from your ex-spouse. That was huge.
That's
was
beautiful.
huge. Right? Because everyone's like, don't say anything bad. Okay, so everyone's like trying not to say something bad. It's like, no, that's a given. Look for good
For the
things
good.
that you can say.
Look for the good. So again, on the friendship level, it's very fun or interesting that you said prior to the divorce, your best friend was your husband. But not only your best friend, he was
would always
almost
tell
your
me, like, I
oldest
need
friend.
more friends. He's like, you need
Right.
more friends. I was like, I
Yeah,
don't
no,
know.
no. I think it's important what you just said. You
Yeah.
get the opportunity to have more friends in your life. You don't need dozens, 1 or 2 or 3 is plenty, but the ability to have that. Let's go to Jeff, because your situation, I think, was radically different from most people, because you told us you didn't get married till the age of 41, which we will call, for want of a better term, an advanced age, sort of the end of the spectrum in terms of getting married.
Absolutely.
Did you avoid having a friendship relationship with your wife, or was it part and parcel of what you really wanted from the marriage?
We were definitely friends before we got married. We met at the beach, which is a place we both love, and we became very good friends and started dating immediately. And I very quickly realized that I actually was going to get married. I didn't realize I was going to have children until we got married. She said, I want to have kids. I'm like, oh, okay, it'll be somebody to watch cartoons with. Who knew that kids are the greatest thing in the world, as well as the biggest pain in the rear end. But yeah, we were certainly friends, and we're friends again. It took me acknowledging that I was responsible for at least half of what had gone on until we could become friendly again. But once I did that, which was about 3.5 years ago, we've been terrific friends. Again, we don't want to live together. At least I don't think she does. I certainly don't want to live with her, and I don't think she wants to live with me. But everything changed, because while we're not married legally, we're married for life through our children. We're going to be interacting for the rest of our natural lives because we've got these 3 wonderful kids together. So it works a heck of a lot better to be friendly and be able to say nice things, like Esty said. I got a question for Esty. Did your kids ever badmouth your husband to you, your ex-husband to you?
When they did, and they would badmouth me to him. And I think because kids will do that, right? They're mad at one, they try to they're just trying to get their own leverage. But so one of the very interesting things for me is that the year before our divorce, in order to salvage our financial situation, which was desperate, my now ex-husband took over carpool and dinner, took over some of the household responsibilities, let him quit his job. And I went insane full time. I was working 16 to 20-hour days. It was one of the worst years of my life. I hated it. I didn't see my children. It was meant to be a temporary situation, which then made my whole life implode. But in that year, while we were still married, he was doing a lot of childcare that he had never, ever done before. And the kids would call me at work, be like, Daddy did this, and Daddy did that, and And so already then I was conditioned to be like, I'm really sorry. And you're just going to deal with it. And I feel like that year, what so many single moms get after a divorce, when the dad starts taking care of the kids in a way that he hadn't previously, I had that year while I was still married. And so then after the divorce, the kids were already used to him. I had to get them reused to me, which was so much emotional turmoil. 14 years, I did all of it. 1 year, he took over his stuff. But kids only have a 6-month memory. They're small. So 1 year in, they're like, oh, you used to cook? Yeah, for 14 years. Those are all my recipes. I made some of them up. Those are mine. Oh, well, Dad makes them, but I created it. Okay. And
wait, go back to Jeff's question. This is very interesting.
Yeah, so what would happen was I would just say I hear you. the same thing I did while we were still married. And I think one of my highlight moments was when my ex and I were, it was one of those brief interludes where we were talking in between. And, the kids would like come back to my house and be like, I don't want to be here. Dad's house is better. He's like, just so you know, they say the same exact thing when they come here. And that was a beautiful moment for me because I had been the one who moved out. So I was the unfamiliar territory, another massive emotional thing I had to work through. But the fact that they would say the same thing to him, right? Oh, we want to be like mom's house better, was like, oh, they're doing this on both sides, right? Dad won't let me have this. Okay. We had really been a parenting team for so many years, and I just continued as a parenting team as best I could. And I feel
let me interrupt and ask this question based on what you asked, Jeff. First of all, did your kids, I don't know how old they were when you divorced. They were what, 11, 12, 15?
4 and 3.
4 and 3? Okay. So they're very, very, very young. So they didn't have, so did they ever in these intervening years, do they ever badmouth your wife to you?
Yeah, that's what brought up the question because
Right.
as my kids got older and first of all, my ex-wife and I have incredibly different personalities. Not that one's good and one's bad, just very, very different. I'm more calm and peaceful and meditative and all that stuff, and she's a little bit more volatile, to say the least. As my kids got older, I would get calls from them, mommy's screaming at me, and why did you ever marry her? And, she's so crazy. And, when Esty said, I always look for a way to compliment my ex-husband, I was thinking, oh, pretty tough to compliment my ex-wife when my kids are saying, why did you marry her? All I could do was my best to say, look, she's your mother. She adores you. She's different than me. That doesn't make me better than her or her better than me. But you got to live with this and just know that she's doing the best she can. Because that was my belief. She was doing the best she could. It's like my father was nuts. It took me many, many years to realize that even though, spent time in insane asylums. He was crazy and violent, but I realized many years later, he was doing the best he could.
And you forgave him?
Yes. It wasn't
because
easy.
No, I'm saying because at one point you did not forgive him for many years.
Oh, yes. I didn't talk to him for about 15 years.
Right, you forgave him. Lori, jump in, chime in.
So when the kids in that moment, you're divorced and the kids are like, why'd you ever marry her? You answer the question. Like,
that's what I did.
Why did you marry her? Well, when I met your mother, I was 42. Those stories I always feel those stories are the glue that your kids can rely on of why they came into existence. Because today, if they're seeing parents fighting and not getting along, they don't have an identity anymore. It kind of goes away when people divorce. And so parents, I feel, are responsible for helping a child discover their identity. So by letting your child know your mother was the most incredible woman I'd ever met. Why did I marry her? Because she was beautiful and kind and conscientious and just, I had to be with her. I had to make you. You had to come into existence. And right now, your mother's dealing with a bunch of other stuff, and you just got to respect her right now because tomorrow she could be happy.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I was as eloquent as you were, but that's absolutely what I went for. My concern, because you said something earlier, Barry, that you come from love and nobody gets hurt, but I'm concerned about the kids because my kids. I grew up seeing divorce is what you do. And my kids grew up seeing, daddy lives in the basement on a mattress while mommy lives upstairs. I'm very concerned about the long-term effect on how they're going to have relationships that are loving and caring and long-term.
1 second, hold up. But you left. They didn't grow up seeing daddy lives on a mattress in the basement. They grew up seeing daddy lived on a mattress in the basement for a short amount of time, realized that was a no-go and changed it. So you started this with a question, and I will actually give you a slightly different answer. The question was, when did I know that it wasn't going to work for my kids?
Yes.
There was a moment when I decided we had to separate. I pushed for separation. I was handed divorce papers, but I pushed for separation. And the moment that I knew we had to separate, even though that was insanely hard for me, and I knew it might lead to divorce, was the moment where I was speaking to a mentor of mine. And I said, how could I do this to my kids? How could I show that's what Jeff is saying. How could I give this example to my children that this is what we do? How could I do this to my kids? And especially my daughter, who is my oldest. And my mentor said to me, he said, if your daughter was in this situation and you knew all the details and she was in the same situation as you, what would you tell her? I said, well, I would tell her she has to leave. He's like, well, that's the example you're setting. You set the example you make.
By the way, this is so important what just happened right now, because this was so real, the interaction here. And one of the shows we're going to be doing in the next couple of months, maybe 2 shows, is exactly on what you brought up, Jeff. What is the example that we are now showing to our next generation? In other words, the kids that I love, the kids that I made with my wife, that I desperately will do anything for to help them. What am I modeling?
Exactly. You're modeling that I'll do the best I can, but there are some things that cross
Okay,
the line.
well, again, that's a whole show, but
Yeah.
it's an amazing discussion because it's one and the same time. I'm going to give an anecdote, if I may. It'll take about a minute and a half. I just came back from going to a friend's wedding. Let me tell you who the friend is. This is a fellow who I have known since he's 12 years old. He's now 47. Well, yeah, 47. And he came to America with his mother and his 2 younger sisters at the age of 12, because the mother had to flee from Europe. She was married to a fellow who was abusive. Now, in the world that Esty and I inhabit, let's say the religious Jewish world, or even in any kind of religious setting like that, Muslim, Catholics, that you don't leave unless it's really difficult situation. She had to flee to another country, and it was difficult growing up. And the kids were obviously very confused, but they weren't. And I became, thank God, a father figure to this 12-year-old boy. Came to America for the first time. He spoke rudimentary English and such. And I was privileged enough to teach him how to swim, how to ride a bicycle, just do things with him. But he was just a good, solid person. And his mother, so good. She was so capable of just making the kids aware that it was a difficult situation, but you're safe now and we can go forward. So I'm going to fast forward now. So this fellow went through, regular stuff, teenager kid, got married at the age of, actually, interesting enough, at the age of 24. But he knew who he was. He was very capable young man. And now is the father of 9. He and his wonderful wife, I went to his wedding 25 years ago. And he and his wife are blessed with 9 children. And I went to the wedding of his oldest firstborn son, who's now 23, and again, remarkably capable, composed, well-spoken person. And so talk about modeling, you never know. It was a divorce in a situation that was very hard, but it depends. Everything depends, right, on surroundings and making sure that the children recognize that integrity, love, caring, kindness will eventually win out. The short term is turmoil. It's storm. But when you get through that storm, when you walk through the storm, hold your head up high. And by the way, when you were saying about the eyes, wonderful, Esty, I was thinking, you've got Betty Davis eyes. Anyway, okay, song is important. I'm off my pedestal, but I just want to make mention that the divorce, it's such a tough situation anywhere. And what are you modeling? And I'll tell you another part of the anecdote is fascinating. So this woman had to flee and was divorced. She has 3 brothers, and all 3 of them are rabbis. So deep in the whole group, right? And the other two brothers divorced. Stuff happens, life. And yet, what are they modeling? They're modeling themselves what this whole podcast is about: integrity in my life, and wanting to show you that when you do live with integrity, with finding the good in life, finding the good in the other person. Lori, I just so love you. Because you said something to Jeff, which of course it's hard for him in the moment to do these things, but he met his wife, he went to the beach. I couldn't live without her. She was the one. And you know something? She's still the one, because you didn't get remarried. She's still the one. Okay, so you have different personalities. Hello. Your father was in an insane asylum, you said. I mean, no offense, but that's a
I
big
feel like your Duffy's like my story, right? One of my
Right.
therapists once said to me, she's like, out of the fire into the frying pan. I'm like, it's still a frying pan.
This is the genius of what we're doing here in this podcast. This is real life. This is tough stuff. Jeff, I don't know if you know Lori's story event, and she'll tell you at one time because her story is unique. She became what she is, the wife expert, because she went through storm, big, difficult storm. Am I right, wonderful Lori?
Yeah.
We're not going to tell her right now, but the point is she went through storm, and thank God her husband and she are together, and 3 wonderful kids, and still going through stuff because you're talking about kids being raised in the United States of America in today's environment, not simple. I mean, we're talking about forget modeling, divorce and such like that. Our country is a bundle of weirdness. So having kids raised, and we'll do a show on this, by the way, it's coming up in either the next one or the one after, with a mentality that, oh my gosh, the world is going to end because of global climate things and this and that. And kids are being taught that. Well, I'd rather have them being taught about divorce and you and your wife being complementing each other, because the other stuff is threatening their very existence. They think the world is going to end in a decade, and they're being taught that. What we're trying to do here is recognize that divorce is let's take a zygote. The zygote comes and splits and grows and things like that. Okay, you came together as 2 interesting, wonderful beings. Now we go apart, but the apartness is done in a very high level. Again, this is called divorce with integrity. We are living, each one of us, myself included, on a higher level than we were in a marriage situation. And I think that's really the thrust here, is that you can go through trials and tribulations in life. It's always going to be. That's the history of mankind, womankind, humankind. The genius is, what do you do? How do you respond in any given situation? Can you respond in a way that brings out the best you and for the people you care most about? Am I correct what I'm saying? I don't mean to be on a soapbox, but I love being on the soapbox, because what we're talking about is our kids, the people we love most. And by the way, even if you don't have children, if you got married and divorced, you have no children, how you model yourself for other people, because people are watching you. Like I told you, the example of the kids getting divorced after 6 months. So now people are going to watch them. Okay, what do? Are you crying in your beer all day? Is it, you down, you can't, or are you saying, look, we did something, I thought it was right, moving on. Do you do that in a positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant way? That's life. Isn't it fun? I mean, hello, with you.
Are we having fun yet?
Isn't it wonderful?
One of my favorite songs of the moment is called Adventure of Me. It's the adventure of me.
Yes. And by the way, Esty,
Is that a song?
That's a real song. It's one of my favorite songs right now. Yes.
Well, would you please send it to Lori? By the
It's
way,
one of the best songs currently playing on Planet Esty. There are a few
Jeff,
very good ones.
you got to hear a quick story. You got to hear a quick, cute story. And again, I'm talking to tens of thousands of people watching also. So Esty lives in Los Angeles. Lori lives in Manhattan Beach, California. It's about 15, 20 miles, 30 miles away. You live in Long Island, right? You're in Long Island now? Okay, so you're far enough away. Yes. But because of our show and such, Lori has an open house when it comes to November and such. And it's about people bringing things and doing a giving thanks day and such like that. And she invited people, and she invited us. Esty shows up. So Esty and Lori have actually had the opportunity of seeing each other in person. And it's a very different experience than seeing each other on Zoom.
We're
we don't
very
know.
different heights than we are on Zoom. On Zoom, we're the same height.
I didn't mention it, but we don't know if Jeff is 4 feet 8 inches or he's 6, 9. It doesn't matter. The point is they met, and it's like, and the interaction of human beings is really what this show is all about. Divorce with integrity is, what are you doing in your life that is literally enabling you to live in integrity, the best you possible, because that's really what this is about. When you're the best you make the world a better place. So on that high note, we're going to wrap this one up. But again, I want to say a huge thank you for your time, your input, your energy, your thoughts. And SC, you have a minute and a half for a closing statement. You have one?
I do. My closing statement is that from the moment that you know, that is the moment that your next stage begins.
Woo! Wait a minute, we got some keepers today. Jeff Goldberg, you have a closing statement?
I can't top that one, so I'm just going to tell you that I'm glad that we're almost at the end, because I have to call my attorney and start a sexual discrimination suit, because it's wonderful Esty and wonderful Lori and Jeff.
I have questions. Can't end on that. That's not it. That's like an opening statement.
Here's the only thing I can say. When you know it's over, then let it be over and move on. Go get it done and move on in a way. I love the name of this show, Divorce with Integrity. That's my belief. There's no reason why you can't both come out on the other side happy and whole and working together if you've got kids, or living your own lives. But I don't think it has to be acrimonious. It just doesn't have to be as painful as we make it.
Thank you. Wonderful. Lori, do you have a closing statement?
I do. So I have probably 6 boyfriends that I've had in my life that I was really close to, and I am good friends with all of them. And if my husband died tomorrow, I would never date any of them, but I like them and I love them because they're now my friends, right? I would have their back on anything. But that's not what I want, right? So making a decision, just because you don't want to have someone as a husband anymore, doesn't mean you have to cut them out of your life and think bad thoughts of them. It is still possible to love someone as a friend and not want to be married to them. And that's okay.
That's wonderful. By the way, I have to make another statement in terms of personal thing. So I was greatly honored to be able to speak at an expo a few weeks ago. Actually, it was in April. I think it was in the beginning of April, and it was in downtown Los Angeles. And wonderful Lori.
You didn't come say hi?
Sheik, I invited you. You didn't come, but Lori came, right? And we had a great time. We hugged and such. You heard me speak, and it was wonderful. And this is such a deep, emotional, real experience. You should know that we're touching the lives of many thousands of people. And it's really important that, like you said, Jeff, the name of the show is what is all about. People love this hour together because they're being touched and they're thinking about it, and they recognize, like you said, that this is the simple analogies were like the butterfly, the chrysalis that's coming out. It's a process. It's probably aches and pains, but it's a process, and that's who we are. We be butterflies, kids. So on the count of 3, we'll do our hug together. Oh, I like it. Look at each one did different. Very nice. And I can't do any of that because my hands don't work like yours do anymore. Anyway, we'll do our hug together. Hug, remember, stands for heartfelt, unlimited giving. So on the count of 3, if you please, 1, 2, 3. Thank you everybody for watching, sending in your questions. We love you. Make it a great one, and best wishes. We'll all be together. We'll send you the next date, and go forth. Live exuberantly. Spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Go mad. Go make a difference. Divorce sucks. Welcome to Divorce with Integrity. This is the most important and open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of moving from matrimony to acrimony to harmony.